The blender was still running when she said it. That's the part that keeps looping in my head. Strawberries, ice, that green powder she pretends she likes, whirring into a noise that made her voice barely audible. She didn't even pause. Didn't even lower her tone. She just said it, loud enough to cut through everything. It's my body. My choice. And then, nothing. She poured the smoothie into her gym bottle, screwed on the lid, and turned to the hallway like I wasn't standing there, like I hadn't spent the last 3 days walking on glass around her mood swings, like I hadn't just asked if she was sleeping with someone else. I was holding the door open for her, by the way. Not metaphorically. Literally. She was on her way out, yoga mat slung over her shoulder, AirPods in, pink laces bouncing with every step. I asked, "Is there something going on with you and Nate?" And she blinked, like I'd asked her to recite pi to the 100th digit. Then came the line. The smoothie. The silence. And she left. The door closed. Not slammed. Not dramatic. Just gently, like the soft closing of a chapter one didn't know we'd reached the end of. I didn't follow her. I didn't shout or text or call. I just stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the spot where she had been, still holding the doorknob like some idiot whose heart hadn't gotten the memo. I guess you want to know what came before. I guess you want context. But you won't get it from me. Because context implies logic, and this was all emotion. This was nights spent alone in a shared bed. This was her shutting the bathroom door even when I wasn't looking. This was her flinching when I touched her waist while reaching for a bowl in the cabinet. This was someone slowly removing themselves from the photograph of our life together, one pixel at a time. No cheating confession. No lipstick on a collar. No dramatic hotel receipt. Just that sentence. It's my body. My choice. But it wasn't just about her body. It was about the way she started taking phone calls outside. About the way she'd smile at texts and tilt the screen away. About the night she came home at 1:14 a.m. and claimed she lost track of time with friends she never introduced me to. About the way she stopped talking when I walked into the room. I had asked her twice, once while she was folding laundry and once while she was eating cereal out of the box like a teenager, if we were okay. She always said we were fine. She said I was overthinking. She said I needed to get a hobby. She said I was too soft. That one hit hard. I guess I'm soft. I keep receipts from our first date. I still wear the watch she bought me 5 years ago, even though the strap is cracked. I remember the exact pitch of her laugh from our second anniversary when I spilled wine on myself and tried to blame the candlelight. So when she stood in our kitchen and said those 5 words, "It's my body. My choice," in response to me asking about another man, I knew. She wasn't defending her autonomy. She was ending a conversation I wasn't even invited to be part of. She chose, and I was not chosen. That night, I didn't pack bags. I didn't touch a single drawer. I just took the ring off my finger, placed it inside the blender cup she'd left in the sink, and walked out the front door barefoot. Didn't even lock it. Let her find it in the morning. Let her decide if that was also her choice. I'm not angry. I'm just gone. The street was cold. Not freezing. Not winter-level harsh. Just that kind of dry evening chill that bites through your arches when you're barefoot and dazed. I walked 4 blocks before I even realized I was still holding her smoothie cup lid, the one she forgot to screw on all the way. My thumb was sticky from the blend of strawberries and whatever powder she always said keeps her centered. I wiped it on my jeans and kept going. I didn't have a plan. No bag. No wallet. Just the buzz of fluorescent lights from the gas station up ahead and the vague idea that anywhere, literally anywhere, would feel more like home than our kitchen did 10 minutes earlier. I ended up at this 24-hour laundromat/internet cafe hybrid. It's wedged between a closed-down pet shop and some tax office that still has a "we're open" banner fading in the window. The guy working the counter didn't ask questions. Just nodded at me when I said, "Mind if I sit?" and went back to pretending to mop the floor. I sat in the corner, curled up on one of those molded plastic chairs, and watched the clothes spin in a washer that wasn't mine. That's when the question hit me. What happens now? There was no fight. No suitcase flying down the stairs. No neighbor calling in a noise complaint. Just a moment, 5 words, and then nothing. It was over, and she didn't chase. Didn't call. Didn't send a text asking where I was. She probably thought I'd be back before she finished her yoga class. She probably figured I'd cool off and come crawling home like I always did when things got tense. But something in me had snapped. Not in the violent way. Not in the flip-the-table kind of way. Just snapped like a loose thread finally tugged free, and the whole thing unraveled without resistance. I thought about going to my brother's place, but the idea of explaining this, of saying it out loud, made my stomach knot up. I didn't want pity. I didn't want anyone telling me I deserved better, or that she'd regret it, or that everything happens for a reason. I wanted silence. I wanted to feel the weight of what had just happened without someone trying to put a bow on it. So I stayed. For hours. Just watching the cycles of other people's laundry and wondering how the hell my life got so quiet. Sometime around 3 a.m., a guy came in wearing pajama pants and dragging a duffel bag. He looked at me once, then at my feet, then back at me. "You all right, man?" he asked. I nodded, then said the dumbest thing I've ever said in my life. "I think my marriage is in the blender." He gave a half chuckle, unsure if it was a joke or a mental breakdown. I don't blame him. I wasn't sure either. I slept for maybe an hour, sitting up, head against the buzzing wall of a soda machine. When I woke up, the sun was just starting to creep in through the glass front doors. It was soft, apologetic light. The kind that doesn't judge you for falling apart in public. I used the laundromat Wi-Fi to log into our shared bank account. I didn't touch the money, just needed to see if she'd noticed. There was a single transaction, $7.99, digital rental for some meditation documentary. Classic Corinne. When things got stressful, she escaped into breathing techniques and YouTube gurus with beards. Me? I escaped barefoot into the night and shared space with a Maytag. I still hadn't cried, which scared me more than if I had. I've always been a crier. Movies, commercials, weddings of people I barely knew. But this? Nothing. Just a strange, numb clarity. Like my heart had gone into emergency lockdown mode. I knew then that going back wasn't an option. Not because of pride. Not because I wanted to teach her a lesson. But because going back would mean I accepted the new terms I never agreed to. It would mean I was okay being invisible, being tolerated instead of loved. It would mean I had signed off on a marriage where trust was optional and communication was one-sided. So I opened a new note on my phone and started typing out a list of places I could crash. Old college friends, co-workers, distant cousins. I didn't hit send on any of them, but writing it made it real. This was happening. I was leaving. And for once, I wasn't going to ask for permission. By sunrise, I'd made it as far as the industrial side of town, somewhere between a warehouse that sold frozen seafood and a self-storage facility with half its neon sign flickering out. I looked like a mess. My shirt was inside out. My socks were damp from a night of walking in someone else's city. I say someone else's because, suddenly, everything felt unfamiliar. The sidewalks I used to drive by, the bus stops I never noticed, the corner stores we used to pass without ever pulling over. It all felt distant. Like I was walking through the dream of a man who used to believe in permanence. There was a payphone outside a liquor store. I didn't even know those still existed. And for reasons I can't explain, I picked up the receiver just to hear the empty dial tone. That sound used to mean possibility. Now it just sounded like static in a room where nobody wanted to speak first. I stood there for a while, just staring at my reflection in the plexiglass surrounding the phone. Puffy eyes. A man who looked like he'd spent years trying not to be an inconvenience. A man who apologized for existing a little too often. That's when I realized something quietly devastating. I didn't miss her. I missed the version of me that existed when she still loved me. I pulled out my phone again, more out of habit than hope. Nothing. No texts. No calls. Not even a "where are you?" message. Her silence wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. It was surgical. Corinne had mastered the art of disappearing while standing right in front of you. She could look you in the eye and make you feel like static. Like background noise. I checked her Instagram, even though I knew better. She had posted a boomerang of her smoothie swirling in the blender with the caption "reset." That was it. That was all the world got of her morning. And it didn't include the part where her husband walked out the front door and never came back. That word, reset. She used to say it whenever she wanted to rewrite reality. After a fight. After forgetting our anniversary one year. After spending our vacation in separate hotel rooms. "Let's reset," she'd whisper, like that was a magic spell. Like we could undo damage with intention alone. But real resets require both people to show up. And I'd been the only one showing up for a long time. At around 8:15 a.m., I finally made a decision. Not a grand one. Not the kind you announce with a speech. Just this quiet commitment. I wouldn't go back. Not to the house, not to her. I would get what was mine eventually, legally, calmly, but I would not walk through that door again unless it was to pack the last of my things. That realization came not from anger, but exhaustion. There's a kind of tired that doesn't sleep off, and I've been living in it for years. I ended up walking into a 24-hour diner called Joni's Fork that smelled like burnt toast and overcooked bacon. I picked a booth in the back and ordered coffee I couldn't afford. The waitress, a woman with a name tag that said Ginger and an eagle tattoo on her forearm, didn't ask if I was okay. She just brought extra napkins and didn't charge me for the refill. Bless her for that. I sat there for maybe 2 hours, staring out the foggy window, watching the regulars come and go, a mechanic with grease on his knuckles, 2 high schoolers splitting a waffle, an elderly man reading a newspaper like time hadn't moved since 1986. And I realized, for the first time in years, that I wasn't being watched, corrected, or judged. Nobody here cared about the version of me I used to perform. Nobody expected anything from me. It was terrifying and freeing. Around 10:30, my phone buzzed. For a split second, I swear my heart leapt. But it wasn't her. It was my landlord. Apparently, Corinne had told him I'd be away for a while, and that she'd be handling the rent. She hadn't even asked me. She had just rewritten the narrative again, this time officially erasing me from the lease, the schedule, the home. That was the moment I knew she'd been preparing for this long before I walked out. I wasn't the first to leave. I was just the last to notice. I finished my coffee, left the 5 crumpled dollars I had in my wallet, and stepped outside. There was no dramatic music, no rain, no final glance back at the diner window, just sunlight, and the strange, calm understanding that I was no longer part of her story. Not by accident, by design. That same afternoon, I walked through a used bookstore I hadn't been inside in years. There was dust on the shelves like time had paused somewhere in 1997, and the guy behind the counter had the kind of expression you develop only after 20 years of watching people thumb through chapters they'll never finish. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but somehow I ended up in the self-help aisle, not for answers, just curiosity. A paperback caught my eye, something about reclaiming personal power after heartbreak. I flipped it open and landed on a highlighted sentence that said, "Some people don't break up with you. They just leave the door open and wait for you to walk out." I don't believe in signs, not really. But that one hit me like a steel-toed boot to the ribs. Because now, things were adding up that I hadn't seen before. Like the way she had stopped asking me to make her coffee, even though I knew exactly how she liked it. Like how she took down the photo of us in front of the lighthouse and replaced it with some minimalist print of a faceless woman standing on a cliff. She said it was cleaner. Like how she'd started putting throw pillows on my side of the bed whenever she made it, a signal I didn't recognize until it was too late. She wasn't preparing for me to leave. She was preparing the space I would leave behind. I left the bookstore without buying anything. I didn't need advice from strangers who'd already healed. I wasn't even sure I wanted to heal yet. I just wanted to understand what the hell I just walked away from. Or more specifically, who I had been living with all this time. Because if I'm being honest, there were things about Corinne I never really understood. Like her obsession with keeping secrets, even small ones. She once said the fact that she hated my cologne for 3 years. Only told me after we ran into one of her old coworkers and he hugged me and said, "Wow, you smell just like college." I laughed. She didn't. Said it was time I started wearing something more grounded. Or the time I found a hidden folder on her laptop labeled Vision. I opened it. It was filled with photos of apartments in other cities, solo travel itineraries, and Pinterest boards for modern divorcee energy. When I asked about it, she told me not to invade her digital boundaries. I thought she was just being private, independent. I told myself it was healthy, that she needed space to dream. But now, that folder felt like a prelude. Like she had been building her post-Emory life pixel by pixel, while I was still trying to pick the right weekend to repaint the guest room. I walked for another hour, through the old business district, past shuttered shops and uneven sidewalks where weeds pushed through the cracks. I ended up at a small park where we used to go on Sundays. There was a faded mural still half visible on the wall across from the swings, 2 bluebirds sharing a branch. Someone had painted a quote beside it that read, "If it doesn't open, it's not your door." That phrase used to annoy me. Now it felt like a dare. I sat on the nearest bench and finally did what I'd been avoiding all day. I called her. The phone rang once. Twice. Then went a voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I stared at the screen, wondering if she'd noticed the missed call, or if she had already blocked me. And that's when it hit me, not the sadness, not the heartbreak, but this creeping, nauseating suspicion. Maybe she hadn't been alone during those nights she disappeared. Maybe Nate wasn't just a guy from her yoga class. Maybe the reason she didn't call or text wasn't because she didn't care, but because she wasn't alone to begin with. I scrolled through her social media again. Nothing unusual, carefully curated images, captions about growth and clarity, the occasional inspirational quote. But something was off. One of the pictures from last week, a shot of a dinner plate at a trendy restaurant, had a reflection in the wine glass. You had to look closely, but it was there. A man's wrist, wearing a watch I didn't recognize. It wasn't Nate's. It wasn't mine. Someone else. Someone I didn't even know existed. And that's when everything inside me turned cold. She hadn't just been waiting for me to leave. She had already replaced me. I wish I could tell you I handled that realization with dignity. I wish I could say I saw that reflection, that unfamiliar wrist, that careless little glint of another man captured in a wine glass, and calmly moved on. But the truth is, I stared at that photo for a full 10 minutes. Zoomed in. Zoomed out. Tilted my screen under the sunlight as if changing the angle would reveal something I missed. But no, it was there. A sliver of someone else. A phantom who had been quietly haunting my marriage, leaving just enough trace for me to second-guess my own gut until now. I got up from the bench in that park like I had just stood from a grave. The ache in my chest was no longer grief. It was nausea. And not the physical kind, the emotional kind, the kind that pulls at your ribs from the inside. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking. Not because I had proof of cheating. Not exactly. But because suddenly, everything that didn't make sense started to. Corinne had always been two people. The one who held my hand in grocery store lines, who kissed my temple when I couldn't sleep, who sang along to 80s music while folding laundry, and then the other one. The one who spoke in half-truths, who stayed out until 2 a.m. needing air, the one who never let me touch her phone unless she was holding it. I used to think the second Corinne was just tired, overwhelmed, trying to reclaim her individuality in a world that eats women alive. But now I couldn't shake the feeling that she had simply been elsewhere. With someone else. With that wristwatch reflection. The cruelest part? She didn't even erase me fully. She kept me alive in her life just enough to not seem suspicious. I was a name in her bio. A tag in old photos. A man-shaped shadow still folded into her narrative, just enough to deflect questions from friends or family who might have asked why I wasn't around as much. But I wasn't part of her real life anymore. I was part of her cover story. And that hurt more than any affair ever could. I wandered back toward the part of town I hadn't dared return to since I left. Not our street, not the house, but close enough to see the kind of car that wasn't mine parked in front of our home. A sleek, dark sedan. Tinted windows. Out-of-state plates. It was gone when I passed by again 30 minutes later, but I saw the faint tread marks in the gravel that hadn't been there before. I'm not a detective. I'm not the kind of guy who follows people or checks phone records or sets traps. I've always trusted. Blindly. Stupidly. But now I felt like I'd been enrolled in a game I didn't even know was being played. And the worst part? I was losing. I went back to Joni's Fork, that diner from the other night. Ginger was still working the counter, now wearing a different apron and listening to a true crime podcast loud enough for the customers to hear. I didn't order anything. Just sat. She gave me a nod, didn't ask questions. I opened Corinne's Facebook. Her status was still set to married. Still had our wedding photo as her cover. But then I noticed something. She had just RSVP'd going to an upcoming art gallery opening, one I didn't recognize. It was 2 nights from now. Hosted at a downtown loft space we'd never been to together. And it wasn't her usual taste. It wasn't minimalism or yoga wellness or solo energy exhibits. This was an erotic photography gallery, edgy, abstract, intimate. Not her vibe. But maybe his. I clicked on the event page. There he was. The photographer. Same watch. Posed in his bio photo with his hand near his chin, casually flexing it in just the right way. He was real. And she knew him. Not just followed him. Not just admired his work. She was tagged in one of his behind-the-scenes photos. Blurry. But unmistakable. She was there. At one of his shoots. Wearing the sweater I bought her 2 Christmases ago, the one she said was too soft for her new aesthetic. She wore it for him. That broke me in a quiet, irreversible way. Not with screaming or smashing or storming into our house like some betrayed movie husband. No. I just sat there in Joni's Fork, phone in one hand, coffee untouched, staring at that photo of the woman I thought I knew, smirking behind the camera of a man I'd never met. She had already crossed the line, and I was still holding the door. I left the diner with the gallery flyer still pulled up on my phone. Not because I wanted to go. Not because I had any idea what I'd do if I saw her there, but because I couldn't stop staring at the photo of her on his page. That blurry backstage shot, her head tilted, her lips parted just slightly, mid-laugh, like she didn't have a care in the world. And the sweater. My God. That damn sweater. She told me it made her feel childish, said it reminded her of the version of herself she'd grown out of, the domestic one, the too nice one, the one who still made me pancakes on Sundays. She wore it for him. For the camera. For the version of herself she was still willing to perform, just not for me. I know I sound obsessive. Believe me, I hear it in my own words. But when you've spent years being slowly erased, any scrap of proof that you actually existed in someone's life becomes a kind of drug. And I wasn't just looking for confirmation of the affair anymore. I was looking for proof that I hadn't imagined the whole damn marriage. I needed to know that she had once loved me, even if it was only briefly, because otherwise, everything I'd built my life around was just a story I told myself while she was busy writing a different one. I had no place to sleep that night, so I ended up back at the storage facility where I work. The building's closed at night, obviously, but I still have the keys. I unlocked Unit B4, the one nobody ever rents because it smells faintly of mildew, and laid out 2 old moving blankets on the floor like a makeshift bed. I left the door cracked open just enough to see the night sky through the chain-link fence across the lot. Cold wind slipped in now and then, but it was better than pretending I was welcome anywhere else. I stared at the ceiling for hours. I replayed everything. Not just the last week. The last year. Maybe longer. Like the time she got that cryptic text message at 11:45 p.m., and told me it was just spam, then locked her phone and slid it under the pillow. Or the weekend trip to Asheville she took, with coworkers, yet didn't bring back a single photo, not even of the mountain she said she hiked. And that unexplained overnight charge to a boutique hotel we'd never stayed at, listed under a name I'd never heard, in a part of the city she claimed she hated. I hadn't asked about any of it at the time. I believed her. Because believing her was easier than admitting what I already knew. I was being replaced in time. Not abandoned, overwritten. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I walked back to our house. Not to go inside. Not to confront her. Just to look. To see if it still felt like home, or if it had already become a museum for a life I no longer belonged to. The street was quiet. The driveway empty. Her car wasn't there, which gave me enough nerve to walk up the front steps. I didn't try the door. I wasn't ready for that. But I did peek through the side window, just past the curtain. Everything looked the same, and nothing did. The bookshelf we built together was gone. In its place was a minimalist standing lamp with a single exposed bulb, the kind you see in apartments that look like showroom displays. The couch was covered in a different throw, beige instead of the deep blue one I picked out. No sign of our wedding photo. No sign of Button, our dog. I couldn't see his bowl or his leash, or even the little paw print map by the back door. It wasn't my house anymore. It was his. Whoever he was. That's when I noticed something strange on the dining room table, where she used to leave folded laundry and grocery receipts. There was a camera. A professional DSLR. Not hers. Not mine. A black, heavy-duty piece of equipment with a thick strap dangling over the side of a chair. Next to it was a single Polaroid photo face down. I couldn't see what was on it, but I saw the edge of handwriting red marker, slanted. I didn't need to read it to know what it meant. He had been there. He had taken photos of her, or with her, and he had been comfortable enough to leave his gear behind like he owned the place. I stepped back from the window, heart thudding. This wasn't an affair. It wasn't a mistake. It was a life. A second, secret life growing in the same space where mine had been slowly rotting. And I had no idea how far it went, or how long I'd been a guest in my own story. I walked away from the house without looking back, and I swear the sky felt heavier than before. Not cloudy, not raining, just weighted. Like something was about to break but hadn't gotten permission yet. My shoes scraped against the sidewalk, slow and dragging, like even my feet were reluctant to carry me forward. I kept hearing the quiet clink of the camera strap in my head, swinging from that chair like it belonged there, like I didn't. I didn't know where to go, so I walked until I ended up at a library. Not to read. Not to rest. Just to sit somewhere that wasn't infected with the memory of her. I found a corner table in the nonfiction section, far from the windows, and pulled my hoodie over my head like I was trying to disappear into the furniture. I watched people drift past, students, retirees, a woman arguing softly with her child, and I kept thinking, all these people have no idea how close their lives are to collapse. How it only takes one person choosing not to love you anymore, and not telling you for your entire identity to start rotting from the inside. At some point, I opened my phone again. I couldn't help it. I clicked back to the gallery event page. 2 nights away. And Corinne was still marked as going. I clicked on the host's profile, the photographer, the man with the watch and the well-lit smirk. His name was Trey Carrington. Of course it was. The kind of name that sounds like a brand. I scrolled through his posts, trying not to let my hands shake, and there it was. Photo after photo of women in moody, curated shadows, laughing at things the viewer couldn't see. And there she was again, Corinne, not just in that one photo I'd already seen, but in 3 others. One of her sitting on the floor barefoot, staring directly at the lens. Another one with her back turned, her hand pressed against glass. And this one chilled me, where she's holding a card that says, "Begin again," written in that same red marker from the Polaroid on our dining room table. This wasn't casual. This wasn't, "I met someone, it happened, I'm sorry." This was theater. This was transformation. And I wasn't in the script. The photos weren't public on his main page, they were hidden in a tagged collection titled The Phoenix Set. I clicked on the caption, "A Study in Rebirth. Women who shed their past to reframe the future." All participants gave full release and consent. Each subject chose her final image. My blood went cold. It wasn't about art. It wasn't about expression. It was about deletion. She had chosen to rewrite her life in front of his camera, piece by piece, until I didn't exist in it anymore. I kept thinking about that photo of her holding the "Begin Again" card. The expression on her face. Calm. Unbothered. She didn't look like someone escaping pain. She looked like someone who had finally taken control by removing me from the equation entirely. And then it hit me. What if I wasn't just being erased from her present? What if she was trying to erase me from her history too? I started retracing her accounts. Her Facebook now had almost none of our photos. Maybe 3 out of dozens. Her Instagram had been pruned like a bonsai tree, neatly shaped to reflect growth, transformation, reclamation. My name had been removed from old captions. My love had become a season. Our home was now a chapter. I even found a post where someone had commented, "Isn't this the trip you took with your husband?" And she had replied, "Different time. Different story. Different story." That's what I had become. A plot she had outgrown. I felt dizzy. I leaned back in the library chair, staring at the fluorescent lights above, and I knew something for certain. This wasn't about falling out of love. This was about identity. Corinne hadn't just moved on from me, she was building a new self out of the ashes of our marriage. A self that didn't remember me. A self that never shared a bed with me. A self that never cried into my chest when her father died. A self that didn't laugh when I sang off-key to her in the grocery store aisle that night in Michigan. She wasn't starting over. She was removing evidence. And it was working. I was already beginning to feel like maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe we were never happy. Maybe she never needed me. Maybe the man she was with now was always the one she was meant to be beside, and I had simply held the spot for him until he was ready. That night, I found an old digital backup of our wedding photos, buried in my email from 6 years ago, sent by the photographer, still unopened after all this time. I downloaded them all, not because I wanted to remember the joy, but because I wanted proof that I had once been real. Because she wasn't just replacing me. She was erasing me. The next morning, I made a choice. Not one born from rage, not a grand performance, not a dramatic gesture. I simply walked into a quiet little cafe downtown, the kind with creaky floors and secondhand furniture, and asked if they were hiring. They weren't, not officially. But the barista behind the counter, a middle-aged guy with ink-stained fingers and a calm smile, said they could use someone to organize the back room. Just a few hours a day. Cash only. I said yes. It wasn't about the money. It was about starting somewhere that had nothing to do with her. That same afternoon, I deactivated every social media account we used to share. I didn't delete them in a rage. I just stepped out of them like old clothes that didn't fit anymore. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to monitor what she was doing, or where she was going, or who she was becoming. Because I realized something important. Her healing had nothing to do with me, and neither did mine. I made a rule for myself, one real thing each day. One small act that reminded me I was still alive, still here, still writing my own story. Some days, it was simple, making a proper breakfast, walking through the park without checking my phone, sitting in the sun with a library book that had nothing to do with trauma or reinvention. Other days, it was harder, like forgiving myself for staying too long, or accepting that I would probably never get an apology. But each day, I got a little stronger. A week passed. Then two. I saw her name once in an email from our landlord about finalizing my name removal from the lease. I didn't even flinch. I just confirmed it. Signed the form. Hit send. It was over. And for the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt light. About a month later, I ran into Ginger, the waitress from Joni's Fork, at a hardware store. She was buying a houseplant. I was replacing a busted doorknob in the small rental I'd finally taken over. She asked if I was doing better. I said, I think I'm finally breathing again. She didn't say anything, just smiled and handed me a coupon for free pie. Told me to stop by the diner sometime. I did. We talked. She had a laugh that didn't ask for permission. I didn't fall in love again overnight, but I started to like myself again, and that was enough. One evening, I stood at the edge of the lake near my new place, same lake where Corinne and I once tried kayaking and tipped over. I hadn't been back since, but this time, I stood there alone, shoes off, cold mud between my toes, and I said something out loud that felt so strange, I had to repeat it just to believe myself. I forgive her, not because she deserved it, but because I did, because carrying around her choices like chains was only delaying my own peace. I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because I knew I could rebuild. Slower this time, softer, with people who saw me, with someone, someday, who didn't need to erase my history to make room for their own. And as the sun dipped below the waterline, turning everything gold for just a second, I realized the most important truth of all. She let go of me a long time ago. And finally, I was ready to let go of her too. Not with bitterness, but with both hands open. Because I may have been written out of her story, but I had just begun writing mine.